The Nobody Parade. The parade for nobody at all. I'm not a superstitious guy. I don't believe in the supernatural, an afterlife, or an all-powerful deity. There's nothing wrong with believing in any of that, I just have no reason to. I think based on my own experiences. I admit that I have an incredibly active imagination, but I need to somehow experience something before I believe it. Sometimes though, you experience things that have no explanation. No reason. No story. No nothing. I was driving southeast to my hometown from college, which is about an hour north of Houston. My band was playing that night, and I was ecstatic. It's about a 2.5-hour drive, and about an hour and you will find a place called New Waverly, Texas. New Waverly has a bit of a shortcut road, FM 1725. It's a 20-mile, winding, 2-lane road that can be dangerous at times but is usually quiet and leisurely. Lined only by trees and the occasional small homestead, it's a pretty relaxing route to take if you enjoy driving. I hate to drive, but I can see why some people would love the scenery of 1725. My tire exploded at mile 11. I don't need to explain that I was pissed. I was headed home to see my best friends and family. I was on my way to do the things I love to do most. Now my tire is busted. Luckily, I have a spare. I don't want to go into the things I felt when I opened my back door to find that my jack was left on the porch about an hour north of my location. At this point, I started to feel pretty stranded. Nobody was around. I had no service. I was stuck. I was totally boned, to put it colloquially. During the next 4 hours, about 6 different vehicles went by, and I tried to flag them down. None of them ever stopped. I walked about 2 miles in both directions to look for a house that might have a jack I could borrow. Only trees. I found that odd because I vaguely remembered passing a small house a few minutes before the blowout. Oh well, I wasn't really thinking about that at the time. After getting back to the Jeep, I decided to take a quick nap in my passenger's seat while I waited for someone to come by so I could flag them down. I don't know how long I was out, but after a while, I heard the faint sound of music in the distance. Marching band music. Here, on tiny little backwoods FM 1725 at about 7 p.m. on a Friday night. At this point, nothing surprised me anymore. I realized soon that this was just the universe taking a giant shit on my head. I didn't care anymore. I just waited as the music grew louder and louder. Sure enough, a marching band began to emerge as they rounded the corner about 200 yards in front of me. They had the whole spiel, matching all white tasseled uniforms with those stupid hats with chin straps. It was great. I remember laughing to myself as I imagined interrupting the band to see if someone could help me get this tire changed. I felt great to see other people though. For a little bit. As they got closer, I got out of the Jeep and started waving my arms. At this point, they were about 50 yards away from me and I noticed that there were trailers and floats following them. Each one was loaded with people who were cheering, laughing, and throwing candy at the trees. This was a parade. A full-fledged parade on a little county road in Texas. A parade with nobody watching at all. Except me. I thought it was sort of weird, but mostly hilarious. I started to get frustrated as the marching band passed, because I was waving to them and gesturing towards my Jeep, making it incredibly obvious that I needed a hand. Nobody in the band looked at me once, except for this one guy. He was playing the snare drum and for only a quick moment, he shot me a glance that I'll never forget. At first, I was impressed at the band's commitment to their art. But then, I got angry. It's like they had no idea I was there. I accepted that they are probably not supposed to stop playing and so I decided to wait for the next float. I turned my attention back to the drummer, who never lost a beat, but was staring right at me. He had no eyes. There were 2 bottomless black pits where eyeballs should have been. When I say black, I mean the blackest I've ever seen. It seemed like his eye sockets were just swallowing any hint of light and matter that came near it. It was unreal. For a short moment, I forgot that I was stranded. He looked at me and I just felt an instant rush of both panic and regret that I got out of bed this morning. Even without eyeballs, his expression dripped of sorrow and sadness that I can't describe with words. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. His eyes were nothingness. Nothingness. I started to get uneasy, but remembered my situation and accepted that nobody in the band is going to stop for me, so I decided to shake the uneasiness and wait for the next float to come by. What the fuck else am I supposed to do? The next float was a trailer pulled by an old black F-250. It was covered in paper flowers and looked like it was put together by a group of kids. Maybe it was for a school organization or something, I don't know, seemed like they did a decent job on it. The band had passed but I could still hear their music. Again, I stepped out into the road and waved at the people, trying desperately to find someone with a jack I could borrow. The float never changed pace. It kept moving. Now I was getting really upset. When it was about 40 feet away, I started to hurl obscenities. I needed help. Help me. The people on the float, and the others behind it, were still cheering, waving, laughing, and throwing miscellaneous candy to nobody on the sides of the street. This was starting to get weird. As the float passed me, I was still waving, and still screaming at them. I saw the people going about their parade business, and was starting to accept that they weren't going to stop for me. I was fuming at this point. They began to pass me, and as they did, all grew silent. I could still hear the band playing up the road, but everyone on the float, including the driver, just instantly stopped everything they were doing. I don't even remember hearing the roaring diesel engine or the Zydeco music that had been blaring from the speakers only seconds ago. They all just stood, arms at their side, not making a sound. They stared blankly at me as they passed. None of them had eyeballs. Only empty black pits. I started to get anxious. I watched the float stroll by, with each of its occupants staring dead towards me. None of them ever made a sound, none of them ever moved. I felt like I was drowning in those black pits where their eyes should have been. I didn't drown, though. Not yet at least. Once they got about 20 feet past the Jeep, the float came back to life. It was like they forgot about me. They just went back to waving, cheering, and throwing their candy to nobody at all. I wasn't sure if I should keep trying to find help, but I got desperate. The next few floats came by. One was a huge trailer decked out in purple and green Mardi Gras decor. There must have been 50 people throwing beads off of it onto the road, to no one at all. When it passed by, they all got quiet and turned directly towards me and just stared at me. They were silent. None of them had eyeballs. I could still hear the band playing in the distance, even though they had already rounded the corner. I wondered if this was some kind of sick joke, but had no idea what to make of it. I didn't care at this point, to be honest. What was I supposed to do? A red convertible came by with a young woman wearing a tiara sitting in the back seat. She had no eyeballs. There was no driver. She only stared silently as she passed me, and once she had, she continued to smile and wave elegantly to nobody at all on the sides of the road. I could still hear the band playing. About 8 more floats passed by. All were different and unique and reminded me of things you'd see in the holiday parades back home. I don't want to waste your time by describing each one, but you could tell that someone spent lots of time constructing these just for this event. And you probably know where this is going. They all did the same thing. An empty, hollow stare as they passed me. No eyeballs. No sound. No driver. The caboose of the parade was a fire truck. Santa was sitting on top, waving and throwing candy to no one. Of course, I assume it was someone dressed as Santa, but I'm not sure what to believe in anymore. Anyway, the truck's horn and sirens blared every few seconds, just to entertain nobody at all. Right as it started to pass me, the truck became so quiet that I thought I went deaf. Santa stopped what he was doing and stared as he passed. Santa had no eyeballs. He seemed furious that I was there. They all had. But he did nothing. Only stared. Nobody was driving the fire truck. Nobody was watching the parade. Once he passed me, he continued to smile and wave at the invisible children standing in the trees. I wish I had a great ending to this story, but I don't. I don't know what the fuck happened to me that day. I don't know if any of it happened. I don't know anything anymore. After the fire truck disappeared around the corner, all of the parade sound stopped completely. Seriously, it just instantly cut off. It didn't fade like they were getting further from me. It didn't die down like they had ended the parade and went home. Instant silence. I can't explain it. For the first time, I couldn't hear the marching band anymore. I couldn't hear anything at all. No Zydeco music, no cheering, no fire truck sirens, nothing. There were candy and beads and other parade detritus littering the road. I lit a cigarette and wandered back to my car. I sat on the hood and tried to determine if any of what I just saw was real. Maybe I'm just going crazy. I still don't know. I don't know anything at all. About 30 minutes after this had all ended, I saw headlights lighting up the trees in front of me. I flashed my lights and honked, just as a last-ditch effort. They stopped. My God, they stopped. For a second I was terrified at the thought of the truck not being driven by anyone at all. Or maybe he wouldn't have eyeballs. I didn't want to look at those desolate black pits again. But nothing interesting happened. It was a nice guy who happened to have a jack and tire iron that he was glad to let me use. I changed my tire. I left that road trying not to think of the unsettling parade that had just taken place, for nobody at all.